Councilmember Hooker.
Here.
Councilmember Menke.
Here.
Councilmember Raisler.
Here.
Councilmember Weisenbeck.
Here.
Councilmember Weisapple.
Here.
All six are present.
Next, we'll have a pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. It is adopted. Next we move on to public comments. If anybody would like to speak to the council, either on a subject that's on the agenda tonight or any other subject, please identify yourself for the record. Gary?
Yeah, Gary Brenner, Highland Dairy Farm, first farm east of Durand. And just a comment for the bottoms there, the well road getting washed out for 50 years now. I've been down there 65 years with tractors and Mayor John Wayne over the year fencing and baling hay as a 5-year-old. In 1973, they did the city well. Some engineer decided we needed a dike, and we argued with that back then, and this ain't gonna work. Sand from the city dump came. Army Reserves, Dick Spindler, Rockwell, 7 boys all hauled sand there. That was their project. Then they put crushed rock on it. So it's been washing out for 50 years. I don't know if we've ever we might have gotten away with it a few times. But anyway, out in the field comes all the junk, and then we gotta rake it back and whatnot. If you travel around the countryside in Wamandee, Ernie, Porcupine, you'll see in some of the dugways on some of the back roads, instead of putting in a couple culverts, they'll put in a 30-foot cement way, okay? I think it was public, you guys can control the well with remote control now or something. Obviously, you guys don't go down to the city when it's with a canoe. But my thought was back then, and it still is, and maybe for you guys, take the road out, right down, save the crushed rock, get rid of that sand, put it right down to the field and the woods level, and it'll just be Thompson's Lake, just flowing, no more road. So that's just something to consider, and that's about all I got for that subject. But we've been knocking our heads for 50 years because some engineer thought it was supposed to be this high, and it should have been this high. And when they do excavate the stuff out of the fields again, one year they came in with an excavator and the teeth were doing this, and then that sifts all the sand and gravel right into that nice topsoil. And I think that we've got a big bobcat now, you were shearing, did pretty nice. And then I come in when it really gets dry, and then I back blade it and I get it right down to the nice dirt and put it back up in the thing. So that's all I got for the subject. Just consider it.
Okay.
Yep.
We can have Matt sort of explain. We have Public Works Committee probably discuss it.
Yeah, you guys got a lot of dozing to do down there.
Yeah, so, okay.
Okay?
Certainly. Okay.
Thanks, Gary.
And we'll take the opportunity about a public service, maybe you can sort of explain the situation with what happens with that road.
Has it ever washed out that bad as like it is?
They wash it anytime the river gets up to 15.
I just
What you see right now happens anytime the river gets up to 15 and a half feet. So
Okay.
it's just kind of another one of those flood issues that we take care of. We'll go out there with, we'll get a dozer from the county and we'll go out there and we'll push all the rock and sand as best we can, right? Equipment, we ain't gonna get every pebble by any means, but we'll basically push it all back in there, fill the voids back up, and we'll end up hauling half dozen loads of gravel back in and grading the road back out. So, usually what happens is when it gets to, like, I'll say that 15-ish mark, once it starts to get higher than the road, the water from about the north side of the road starts to run over to the south side of the road, and then it just slowly starts taking the sand and gravel and everything with it.
So when it did get this high, what time it got to, what, 16.2 and 16.4?
Yeah.
So if you had to get to the well, is that road still high enough you can just take a truck through?
Or when it's flooded like this, we can't get to the well, so we don't run that well when it's flooded.
Well, you don't even run the well when it's flooded.
And I was out there yesterday. I mean, it's about a 4-foot
Yeah,
hole,
there's
and then there's
two-
culverts that are under.
there's two-
So you couldn't drive through it if you tried.
Probably two different 4-foot swales, one up close where you can see that culvert, and then another one down where they kind of have the lumber piled down there. It's pretty typical of both both places it washes out every time it gets to, I'll say 15.5-ish feet. Don't quote me on the
Exactly, somewhere
14,
there.
15, so.
Okay. And I don't know if, I mean, again, we can discuss it in public, we'll see if there's any options about doing something different.
We gotta be careful though, cause you have a water main under there, so it ain't like you can just,
Oh, okay.
if you lower that road, now we run into not having our water main buried, and we run into the potential risk of freezing the water main if the frost gets down there, so it's not
There's
just
more
a
to the
simple,
story, yeah. And
you
that's
know,
fine.
like in order to do, I could look into it, but rough guess, in order to do what Gary's talking about, I understand what he's talking about, we would have to lower the road, 3-4 feet. Well, if I only have a 6-foot depth water main through there, now I only have a 3-foot depth water main, now water main's gonna be freezing and stuff, so it's not, there's other issues, there's buried power, there's buried
Sure.
fiber going down there, so it's not just as simple as cut that down, pour concrete and walk away from it. Everybody's gonna have to move all the utilities,
Okay.
things like that. It's
Sure.
gonna be pretty
Costly to
it's gonna
do
be
this.
pretty costly to do that versus, I know it's a mess, I understand it, but, it's actually cheaper for us to have a dozer out there for a couple, 2-3 hours, push all that material back, haul in 3-4 loads of rock and grade it out, because it only happens, again, the river doesn't come up to 15.5 feet every year, I think that's probably maybe the fourth or fifth time in 15 years that I've had to grade that road out, so. And when it comes down to cost, which is obviously how we make our decisions, it's a lot cheaper and for us to do it this way than it would be to do it that way.
Okay.
But most definitely can put a cost comparison together if you so wish.
Yeah, we can. Okay. Any other public comments? Joe?
Yeah, the Ash Creek problem. My name's
That
Joe
sounds
Leffering,
interesting.
46 years as a homeowner. I guess there's a couple new council members, so I'm gonna repeat a couple things, but not everything. I was here 2 weeks ago. I'm representing the citizens of Durand that have ash trees planted by the city on public property, the boulevards. These trees are now diseased and a public hazard. 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting, I cherry-picked some Durand city codes, some in abutting landowners' favor and some in the city's favor. I don't see no need to quote those again. Here's a fact. The boulevard is the property of the public and under the management of the city. Tonight, we're not talking about curb and gutters, sidewalks, or utilities. I'm talking about diseased ash trees that the city planted without permission. And they needed no permission. It's public property. The majority of cities around us remove their diseased trees in public areas. Example, Eau Claire, Menominee, and some our size, like Monrovia and Wabasha. I believe the city council voted to help the taxpayers on the Laneville project was the right thing to do. You have the power to do the right thing again by removing all diseased trees on public property, parks, boulevards, etc., at the city's expense. I remind you that the city inadvertently caused this problem by planting these trees. None of you have ash trees abutting your property. Most of you don't even have boulevards. So you have no conflicts of interest to vote for all the diseased trees on public property to be removed at the expense of the city. How would you feel if 45 or so years ago, you bought a home in Durand, you paid out of your pocket for the removal of all the Dutch elm diseased trees? In my case, I had 9 of them, huge. I live on a corner boulevard. I took them all down at my expense because when I bought the house, they were there. And they were huge, and I don't believe the city planted them. Now, a year or two later, the city takes it upon themselves to plant new trees in the boulevard that abut your property. They grow as the years go by, become diseased, and now the city wants you to pay for the removal. I mean, how would you feel? Think about it. I'm serious. As a homeowner and taxpayer, how would you feel about that? Do you think that's fair? Neither do we. This may sound familiar. This is a repeat from 2 weeks ago. That concerns what the city sent out. Any person who receives a determination or order under this article from the city and objects to all or any part thereof shall have the rights to appeal such a determination or order. After such a hearing, the common council may reverse, affirm, or modify the order. I appeal to the mayor and city council to, number one, vote to not assess abutting property owners, because the boulevard is the property of the public and under the management of the city. And the city planted the trees when there were no codes to let abutting landowners know that they might be liable for the trees. Or number two, I think this actually works better. To amend the code to specify that these trees on public properties, boulevards, parks, etc., and under the management of the city, the cost of removal, et cetera, shall be borne by the city. You know, you reword that as you see fit. Get the grants available to help defray the city's cost. And yes, when I say the city's cost, that means the taxpayers' cost. It's our money. Let's get on this and get it done. We, the citizens, deserve a discussion by the mayor and the council and a vote to pass one of our appeals, and acknowledgement of how each member voted. That's all I have. Thanks for listening.
Okay. This isn't, of course, that's an agenda item later, so we'll get to that. Any other public comments? We don't have any scheduled appearance. We'll move on to the consent agenda. The following matters may be acted upon by the city council utilizing a single vote. Individual items, which any member wishes to address in greater detail or as a separate item on the regular agenda, may be removed from the consent agenda upon the request of any council member. We have the minutes from the regular city council meeting from April 12th, 2023, and the, hold it, one of them was a special, wasn't it? No, not yet. You don't have the ones from the...
I think we had on the last one, the March wasn't, the date wasn't correct, so it's different.
Oh, okay, and the regular city council meeting from March 22nd, 2023. A bartender's license for Ashley Blackett at the Cell Block, and a picnic license for the Durand Rural Fire Association for their fundraiser on May 20th, 2023.
Everything's fine.
Everything's fine. so-
Excuse me, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I'll make a
Um,
motion, we approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. It's approved. Next, we'll move on to business agenda, mayor's report. Not too much to talk about. We've met a lot lately, so I haven't. But I'd like to commend all the city staff that had to deal with the flood and so on, especially with Matt and his crew being displaced down here. But any help, obviously, the Chief Ridgway and his staff gave to make sure that all the signage was up, make sure everybody was aware. There were no major incidents, I think, even though we had 2 crests and it got pretty high, but obviously all of the staff of the city who helped to make sure we were dealing with what we had to deal with. And again, we deal with it every year, but this year is just a little higher than normal. I think both of those crests got into about the top 10 somewhere along the way or close to it. One was for sure, but the other one was. But again, I'd like to thank everybody for their work to make sure that everything was done. So, okay, that's all actually I have to report on. We have nothing that came off the consent agenda. Next, administrator's report.
Couple short items as well. Just wanted to highlight, I'm sure you all read or saw on other local media, the presentation that Senator Tammy Baldwin's office did at Advent Health last Thursday. Is it just last Thursday? Thursday before, I'm sorry, since last time that we met. So $900,000 plus to revamp the garage. There were some limited plans that were shown in the paper. If you want to see the full plans, Doug Peterson at the hospital did allow me to have a set. So if you want to see them, I do have them in my office. So that's a real plus for both the hospital, for what they're going to do with it, and some of their scanning machines that they're going to put in their mobile scanning units, I should say. But real plus for our ambulance service to be able to get in and out and for the patients. So, and I think as you saw, as CEO Peterson said, it should be done by the time the snow flies, which sounds like September to me, right?
Maybe earlier.
Yeah, maybe earlier. Just quick update, obviously you're all seeing that the Dollar General is well underway now for work. We've had some concerns from citizens in that area. Obviously we'll continue to work with them and ask for their patience from the standpoint that is going to be a mess for a while. Not unlike our other projects that we had within Laneville last year, Laneville on 3rd Avenue. So we will continue to work with the contractors though and make sure that the folks have access in and out of their properties there. So, again, just in case you hear anything on that. And my final one, I was a little remiss on this today, but today is Administrative Professionals Day, so I would like to publicly thank the work done by City Clerk Morgan and our assistant Jenny King in our office. I think those are the only administrative assistants we have anywhere. And we're still working on a lunch date, so they'll hold me to it though. So. But again, thanks again for all their hard work.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any questions for the city administrator? Okay, we'll move on to public safety, police department. Chief Ridgway?
Just a couple things tonight. Jacob Lindsley, part-timer, tonight is his last shift. It officially is done on May 1st, but he got a full-time job at the Madison Police Department. Starts the academy mid-May, so he's moving down to Madison on May 1st. So he'll be finished after his shift this evening. On Friday is the prom mock crash. Brandon's been planning that with school staff and other entities as well. So we'll have Durand EMS, Durand Fire, Sheriff's Department, Wisconsin State Patrol, and us obviously up there doing a mock crash scene, and then there'll be some guest speakers afterwards talking about OWIs and kind of the impacts of those crashes. So looking forward to that event. Hopefully the weather is nice so we can get that done before prom on Saturday. Then last Sunday, we finished up our Explorers program. We finished up at the range. The kids got to learn about firearm safety. They got to shoot our firearms, our less lethal beanbag rounds. And then we went into working with the fire and EMS. They did a mock crash there. So they watched the EMS work on a patient inside of a crashed vehicle, and then they watched fire cut the roof off the vehicle and fold it back, so they got to watch them use all the tools and things like that. And then Chief Deputy Matt Raisler did a demonstration with the drone program that the Sheriff's Department has. So they got to see the drones, and they actually got to fly a drone, which was pretty cool. I was a little jealous standing back watching that. But, and then K-9 Deputy Darren Lowenhagen came and did a demonstration with his K-9 Jack as well. So it was an evening of just a lot of stuff going on. It was great to see the kids there enjoying the program, and we look forward to having that again next year as well. So, and that's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Any questions for the police department? If not, well, I also mentioned to Councilmember Raisler about I'm assuming you did the film of the flood and put it up on your, I thought that was really neat, by the way, to see it from that angle. I've seen the flood all my life, but to see it with that, I thought that was just sort of a neat thing to put up there. So people got to see what actually the water goes and what happens, so I thought that was interesting. So I thought that was okay. Any other questions for the police department? Okay. Next, we move on to discussion possible action regarding applying for the federal COPS grant. After some discussion with the city administrator, I'm the one who said, let's put this on the agenda for consideration. The one thing we've always been dealing with, especially trying to find part-time officers and so on and so forth, is there a way that we could possibly get some more help on a full-time basis, and one is the federal COPS program. And quickly, I don't know if you want to explain exactly how the grant works. And it's a situation where there's a deadline coming up, where you have to, and in May, I believe, right?
Yep.
So we would have to decide. Now, it's one of those things we could see what happens, and then if we would get the grant, we could deal with it. But if, Chief, if you'd like to sort of explain how it works.
Yeah. So ultimately, what we're asking for tonight is permission for me to write the grant. And if people, the majority aren't in favor of potentially having to pay what the grant is going to require us to pay over a 4-year period, then there's no sense in us writing the grant. So I'm going to give you some background on the program. There were some changes compared to the way they used to handle it. So now they are handling it, it's a 75-25, but their maximum that they will pay the city of Durand is $125,000. So for 3 years, 75% paid by the federal government, 25% paid by the city of Durand, and then you're required to maintain that officer for 1 year after that. So it would be a 4-year commitment. But but because of the cap at 125,000, which is new, they never used to cap it, it used to just be a flat 75%. They capped it at 125,000. So if over a 3-year period, that's $41,666 and some odd cents would pay for our officer for 3 years. Scott and I have done some talking. We figure, a lot of it is contingent on what type of insurance plan a new officer would have. If they came in with a family plan, needing a family plan, obviously that would be higher. If they came in with a single plan, it would be lower. But we figured a rough estimate would be about $70,000 for an officer to start here, wages and benefits. So looking at that $70,000, we would be at $17,500 city for the first year, $52,500 from the feds. And then depending on pay raises, you're gonna have some pay raises, some increase in insurance costs, things like that. So you're getting about 2.25 years out of that grant, a little less than 2.25 years out of that grant is all. You're getting, so the city would be responsible for the other 1 3/4 of that 3-year or 4-year program. So we would run out of money in year 3 at some point with the grant. So, and then it would be 100% paid by the city of Durand. We have $35,000 in our part-time budget, but right now we are down to very limited part-time help. We have we have 3 officers that work full-time for other police agencies right now, so their availability is very limited. We have 1 retired officer who still works for us that works full-time over at Dick's RV. So his hours are very limited as well, and he said he's gonna give me another year, and then he's gonna fully retire from law enforcement. So he's very much a day shift, special events, doesn't wanna, obviously, will help us where he's needed, but he would prefer to stick to special events and night shift as he ends his career here in law enforcement. So we're very limited on help. I had an ad out for 3 weeks, a couple weeks ago it ended, and I didn't get a single applicant for it. I've got an ad out now again, we'll see if we get any apps for it. I do have 1 employee that's currently in the academy up at Chippewa Valley Technical College. He graduates June 9th, Friday of Fun Fest, and then he starts working for us June 10th of Fun Fest. So he doesn't get a break after he graduates, he's got to start right away. So when he finishes the academy, he'll be a big help. I talked to him today, and I just told him, I said that we have a lot of hours available. Things coming up this fall, we're gonna have a lot of hours available for him as well. So I just asked him to hold off on applying elsewhere part-time, and he said, just concentrate on Durand. Let's get you through training in June and July, August, September, and we're gonna be able to give you plenty of hours with what we have going on. So he hasn't applied anywhere else, so I'm hoping we can have him through the fall to help us out with things, but it's pretty tight. If he goes into a rotation for one of our officers who's gonna be out this fall, we're gonna still be down to not much for part-time help. The part-time policing is really dying. There's so many full-time jobs out there. There's so many agencies that have multiple openings that these kids are graduating, and they're not even getting to the academy without already being hired. I mean, the numbers are, it's amazing how many people are sponsored in the academy that already have full-time jobs. So it's just, we're not gonna be able to live off part-time anymore. So ultimately, it's a discussion of what type of policing level does the city of Durand want? And if we want our shifts filled at the same level they have been filled over the past few years, then we're gonna have to make a decision on adding another officer, or if we if we are saying, nope, we're not gonna fill it with a full-time officer, then we're gonna have to come to the realization that we can't fill the same amount of hours that we have in the past. So.
And what I was going with here is that, the reason why I brought it before the council tonight was because, again, to make the decision whether we're gonna apply, this is all we're doing tonight. But again, there would be commitment if we got it and decide to accept it. And since we're coming up on a deadline, I thought it was important because again, if no one around this table, stop, forget it, don't even try it, we're not gonna do that. But if we wait to come up with some grant money to help us deal with this situation, the idea of taking the money that we have from a grant and also money we have for part-time people that we're not gonna spend, because there's nobody to hire anyway. The question is, would we be able to facilitate this, sustain it, substantially for the 4 years to be able to do it? And that's the reason why. So that's the decision we're making tonight, to say that are we interested in at least applying for the grant to see if it's a possibility we can get it. What's the percentage of people who apply for this get this?
Good question, Mayor. I didn't look into that.
Okay.
I don't know that answer, sorry.
But-
I can tell you.
I think it's generally pretty liberal and easy to get, I think.
Okay.
I don't know the exact figures, but I think
But general, okay.
overall, a lot of people that apply generally get it.
And I think some of the reason for that is, you really have to commit to it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you choose to accept, obviously. Stan noted that, that 4th year piece, and, frankly, no one's interested in typically laying somebody off after, having them on board for 4 years either. So, again, those that apply, have a serious interest, and those that don't, or know that they can't maintain the other piece, just frankly don't. Again, I wanted to reiterate too that I know there were some discussions of this is whether or not we hire a permanent full-time officer is a huge discussion, huge decision, and again, just wanted to reiterate that we are not forcing that issue here tonight. That is not for tonight's discussion. The fact that we are under this tighter time frame than I guess we realized, and the other piece is this grant doesn't come around every year. It's a rather cyclical type, and it kind of depends on. This is more what I've seen, because we did get one of these grants when I worked in Altoona 20 years ago, and that was under the Clinton administration. Again, and I hate to characterize politics, but this does seem to be a little more Democratic favor in the years that it's come up.
I kind of thought we had one here, would have been, probably mid-2000s, I thought, when they added, because there for a while, they went to 24-hour coverage, and I thought that was because of the cop grant. I could be wrong, but it was like Chad Pollock was the officer, I think, that they brought up.
That's when we got it in Altoona, was, I want to say 2004.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things that I would look at, and maybe they've changed it, but, so the county, we looked at it pretty aggressively in 2020, and we ultimately didn't, because at that point, they were requiring you, if you got it, you either had to already have been nationally accredited, or by I think year 2, you had to become accredited. And just doing that for us was a huge expense. Bigger because we have the jail at the county, but also something to maybe check in to make sure that that's, because that, that could be another, 10, 15,000 and a whole bunch of, it's a good, it's awesome to be accredited, but it takes a ton of work.
Yeah.
So.
I read through the frequently asked questions, and I didn't see anything in the
Okay.
cloud accreditation, and I didn't see anything in the fact sheet that they have
Okay.
out that you had to be accredited.
Yeah.
There's agencies that hire officers specifically for
Yeah.
accreditation.
Right, yeah.
We need them for patrol more than.
How many part-time hours are you looking to fill?
Well, we have $35,000 in part-time, so it just depends on the wages,
Okay.
the part-timers and things like that. We normally use part-timers every Saturday and Sunday day shift is what we're trying to fill. So,
And those are 12-hour shifts.
8-hour shifts.
8-hour shifts.
Mhm. And then they fill in our vacations and our sick times when we're gone for trainings and things like that.
So you budget 35,000 per year for
Yeah.
part-time?
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that your feeling is, I know that when the city minister and I discussed this, is the first step in this grant process, it's not like you're gonna spend a week doing this, about a day's work or two, and you should be able to get together the information you need for the grant. correct?
Yeah, they switched one process on me. We used to have what was called a DUNS number. Now they switched it to a unique entity identification number. So I'm going through that process right now. I'm hoping that I have that. They're supposed to get it to me before the deadline of the 4th, and then I have 2 forms that I have to fill out before May 4th, but I can't do them without the new number that they are making you have. And I haven't, we haven't applied as a city for any grants since they switched from a DUNS number to a UEI number. So it was kind of a hiccup when I went to do the 2
Is that a number
forms.
issued by the federal government?
Yes. Mhm. Yeah.
Okay,
Mark, to answer your question, I think the most, just looking back a little bit, I think the most we've ever had in any given year is right around 1,500 hours for
Okay.
part-time staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is-
Again, as Stan noted, the 2 shifts and then the variation of filling in for
And training.
vacations and training and things like that.
Is there, does CBTC, when it trains its officers offer a program where they can send them in and have you work with them?
They don't, so what we've been doing with CBTC is the 2 current officers that we have right now that are part-time, Isaac and Zach. We
Mhm.
sponsored them through the Law Enforcement Academy at CBTC. So then they attend the Law Enforcement Academy while they're an employee of the city of Durand. We don't pay them an hourly wage, but they get paid for mileage and meals by the state, and then their academy gets paid for by the state as well. And then when they get towards the end of that program, we let them start working shifts with us. We have them do come into trainings with us during that entire program. And then when they get out, then they start their actual field training program with Sergeant Shellhorn, go through that, and then they start working part-time.
How's that working out? Do you like that?
I like it, but the problem is we saw it with Isaac and Zach. We really had them where they were just hours for about 2 months. So we put in a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of training hours to have 2 months worth of work out of these guys and gals, especially when they're probably a month working maybe 10 to 12 shifts. So the expense that we put in for that little bit of return, I think is not worth it.
Okay.
At all.
there's just so many full-time jobs out there.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And so part-time, again, get some training going. And and the other thing that I think was mentioned is, I mean, there's some people going into the academy already have full-time, not even part-time on the other end.
Most,
Once-
not some, most.
Okay, most, yeah, have full-time jobs already, because they're obviously, agencies are trying to get people through the academy so that they can fill full-time positions.
Sure.
So. Okay, so again, the decision tonight is, do we move forward, at least apply, and see where we go from there? And I guess that's a decision to make here.
So that, assuming we do get the grant, we accept it, the officer, it'll be the same officer for 4 years? Like, are they under the same commitment as far as,
They are not, they're not.
so that can translate?
We'd have to, the position we would have to maintain, wouldn't have to be the
for
same
4
officer.
years.
Yeah.
Because you probably have somebody that would want to come in, you're probably going to get a pretty new officer for this position, as we finding anyway, that they're probably, either if another opportunity comes up for either whatever, or even in our own, what if somebody else moved on and said, well, I want to move over to a regular full-time position, school resource officer, whatever, you know, if somebody else is just changing, I'm assuming they would want to go that direction, since this is technically a limited term
Yep.
position of a maximum of 4 years.
Yep.
But again, they could move on to a different position or so on, and then we just move somebody else into.
Yep, correct.
And then we would have no part-time?
We have to maintain part-time, but the thing is we're not gonna fill shifts part-time because they just aren't available. We have to maintain our current budget status as is, but we're not going to be spending that 35,000 because there's just no way we're gonna fill those part-time shifts.
So that's how we kind of supplant the budget on this, but I'm not sure if that was your question. if that
Yeah,
was what you-
basically,
yeah.
you say 15 grand the first 2 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Or how, yeah, however we choose to work
Debate
that,
on-
to make it all work for that 125,000, because, I mean, that would be the goal, is to at least get full funding for the 3 years, and then we're on our own for the fourth.
That's the way I would hope that they would allow us to handle it, is just split that 125 3 ways, and then it's
Yeah.
less of a budget impact on us on year 3.
Yeah. I don't think they care, the way I was reading it, I don't think they care. I think it's just a matter of however you wanna, but it's capped at 125,000
Yeah.
after 3 years.
Yeah.
So we would have to maintain our budget, our 35 for part-time, plus we would be giving the extra, say, 30,000 the first, potentially 3 years.
No, we would be using part of that 35,000 to cover.
We would be using part of the
Yeah. What he's saying is we're maintaining some budget for some part-time people, but,
You have to maintain your current budget level. But what I'm saying is, there's no way we're going to spend our current budget level.
okay, so what we're saying is we're doing that. Yeah, if you don't have anybody to pay, it's not, you can't.
The requirements of the grant are you
Okay, that's,
cannot,
okay.
you cannot supplant any funding.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Trey, I kind of took your question to mean will we still, even if we do hire another full-time officer, will we still need part-time staff?
Right.
Was that your question, or
That was
your
a
question?
portion
A
of
little bit both, okay. And so,
Yeah, so if we had part-time available, I would not push part-time, but if we had part-time available, it'd be nice to still have them for parades, for filling in vacation, somebody gets injured, whatever that may be. But we're not going to spend the money that we currently are.
It won't be $1,500, it'll probably be more like 200.
Yeah,
something like that.
exactly, we're not gonna be pushing, we're hiring part-timers.
and also, if we are allowed to apply for the grant, I mean, we'll start work on how this is going to work and talk about that well in advance even, because I mean, I guess the issue still exists whether we get the grant or not.
Yeah.
And then, okay, what are our options if we don't get it? So,
The,
we'll have those spelled out.
And this would start fiscal year 2024?
I believe so, yes.
But obviously, it's flexible as part of it. I'm not sure. It isn't just a flat.
It doesn't start
There's some-
January-
There's some
doesn't January
flexibility to
1st.
it, right?
Yeah.
It does, whenever you start, okay.
Is there a reason we would, so year 4, we're paying 100% of this position?
There's
So-
no way around that.
So
right?
we
Yeah.
can, like, we'd have to figure out a way to make that work.
Yes.
Is there any reason that if we can make that work year 4, we don't make that work long-term? I mean, my question is, how can you make that work for just 1 year and not long-term?
There's ways that I could come up with to make it work for a year, and I'm just being very, very blunt on one of them. We do have, Matt's budget, we have a fair chunk of money in the general fund for crack filling ceiling. If we opted for a year to say, you know what, we're gonna borrow for that, for 1 year, that would really help cover an officer for a year. And if then that 5th year, if we decided we can't afford it, but again, we can't do that forever. I guess the other piece of that would be then, we'd be looking at the referendum. I mean, there's just no other way than, that frankly, a number of communities have done lately, especially for public safety.
And with good success.
Generally, yes.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the grant program? If so, would somebody like to make a motion concerning that we would at least apply for the federal cops grant program?
A motion that we apply for it.
Okay, is there a second? We have a motion and a second. It's on the floor for any further discussion? To apply for the federal? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion's agreed to. We'll move forward with the application. Anything from the fire department?
We're all fire meeting tonight, which is why Chief King is in here.
Oh.
So, but no updates.
Remember, tickets for sale, big fundraiser coming up. Don't be shy, right?
Yeah, they're in my office.
Everybody this morning, okay. Any report from the ambulance?
I wanted to give an update, and we're gonna hear this. So we did not get the March information on the runs. I did get that from Angie Bignell the other day. So we had a total of 25 calls for 911 calls in March. We made 22 of those, but the 3 that we missed, one was actually an outlier, was I think outside of Mondovi. So technically not our area. The other one was an error. Apparently there was some sort of mix-up on an address. So it was initially thought it was in Durand, but it wasn't, and I guess that still counts. So technically we missed 1 call. So kudos to them. We had 2 transfers requests, 1 that we made. But I will tell you that reviewing the payroll today for this week, it's kind of hard to figure through, and I know we don't have all the run reports. But it really looks like in the last 2 weeks that we made at least 8 transfers, maybe 10. Now, if you remember last week at the report I handed out, we only made 9 all of last year in 2022. So the fact that we made 8 in one 2-week period, it was great. And frankly, what that means is that we've got 4 people on at any given time. So again.
So you're trending up.
Trending upward, yes. So that's a good start, and even when, Tom, who was with us on the interview process, noted Baldwin spends a lot of time on transfers because that's gravy, And that's a real plus for us, making the 911 calls and transfers. That's all I have to report.
Okay, next we're on to Public Works Utilities. Superintendent Gillis?
Yeah, Russ isn't here tonight, he's actually on vacation for a week, so, next week you're gonna see Cedar in town doing the topography for the Madison Street project. So they'll be out collecting all their data and doing all, starting their engineering work. We'll need to probably have some meetings, public works meetings in the next month or so here to kind of start reviewing that process, what we want to see, maybe have some public hearings and get some input from you guys and the citizens potentially during the design project. So you're gonna see them in town, getting all their topo work done, and we'll probably be scheduling soil borings here in a couple months as well. Mayor touched on the flood a little bit. It is out of the shop. It did crest twice, once at 16.4 and the other one was like 16.3. Out back here, not a lot of damage. Obviously, we have to pressure wash the shop floor and do some sweeping and cleaning in there. Obviously, get all our stuff up and out of there, pulled out, and then afterwards do some cleaning. Once it completely recedes, we'll have to get the street sweeper out back here, sweep the streets, probably power broom off the sidewalks. It does leave a little dirt film on there. You'll see the park looks a little grungy, but once it rains and the grass starts growing, that'll go away. So a little bit of work that needs to be done down here to clean up from after the flood. Tidbit of information, the biggest impact that we have here is actually at the wastewater treatment plant. Normally, we are 450,000 gallons a day. Well, the last 4 days we were at almost 1.3 million gallons of water went through the wastewater treatment plant. So it went to, today we were at 880,000. As the river goes down, that goes down. So just goes to show the work that needs to be done in our collection system for infiltration. Once that groundwater comes up, we got a lot of old pipes with a lot of cracks in them where that water just kind of seeps in. And so we were treating 1.3 million gallons for a couple days, and 1.2, and 1.1, and then a million. We got back down to about 700, and we flooded again, and we're right back up to 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So we are on a good note. We are meeting all of our DNR limits currently, so there's no issues with that. But our design flow is actually only 860,000 gallons a day, so you can tell we're well over 400,000 over what our plant is designed for. So a lot of work down there, monitoring, the lift station. We had pumps running 20 hours a day, 18 hours a day. We had number one pump that ran for 24 hours a day in hand just to try and keep up while the other two pumps ran in automatic. So gets kind of nerve-wracking down there a little bit, just things that people don't see. Try to give you a little information there. But otherwise, it's trending down, and we're hopefully going to be back to normal here in a couple days.
How old are some of those pipes that are leaching like that?
60, 80 years old.
Okay. And how the pump's holding up, good?
Pretty good. We rebuild them. We do pump maintenance.
Yeah.
We actually just rebuilt a couple of them probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So they're holding up well. The one thing that does need to happen in that building is an upgrade to the telemetric system. We just upgraded the water system. That building has that kind of that same issue with a lot of old technology and old computer boards that are not supported anymore. So when things kind of start to go bad with our telemetric system, the system that reads the level of the water coming in and turns the pumps on and off, we have a hard time finding replacement parts for that. So through the budget process, we'll probably be exploring some upgrades down there over the next couple of years as well. So.
Okay.
How much ARPA money we left? Because we used a hunk of to do that SCADA system for the water. We used quite a hunk of our ARPA money from the federal relief program. So anyway.
And a lot of old wiring issues down there, things have been added on and spliced into over the years, and not everything there's not wiring diagrams for anything anymore, just, kind of some of that older, 50-year-old, that was put in, I think 50, it was put in 80, so, 43 years old this year, so, over the years, it's been added onto and patched into and tried to get newer technology to work with the older technology that's in that building, so. One other thing too, the 2022 Consumer Confidence Report is out and available on our website, or you can pick a copy up here at City Hall. That is the water report for 2022. That basically shows what we test for in that given year. It's not every test, it doesn't show all our back teeth tests, but all the specialized testing that the DNR requires us to do is in that report. Should be in tomorrow's paper as well, if you want to read it in there. Yep. So that's a report that I have to do every year that's out and by state statute, it has to be advertised in the paper and available to the public. So it is available here at City Hall or on our website if you want it. Pool, we are we pumped it out this week. Next Monday, we are going to do the official test run on the swimming pool. Monday, Tuesday, we'll fill it up, and then hopefully Tuesday afternoon, we can fire the pumps up and see if we got any major issues that'll hinder us from opening this summer. Just from walking around the pool, it did not winter well. There's a lot of concrete spalding, curb and gutters chipping. The seams are spread out a little bit more than normal, going down to the deep end. So, barring turning them pumps on and see what's going on underground, cross your fingers, knock on wood, go to church, whatever you want to do.
But if you candles, don't say
I don't want to jump the gun too much, but I'm gonna state very highly on the scale of this is probably gonna be our last year of being able to open that swimming pool with what I'm seeing. Lights are falling out, concrete spalding, chipping out, falling out. So this is, I'm venture to say,
one way or the other.
our last hoorah, one way or the other. So I would just want to throw that out there a little bit in advance for a little prep. So other than that, we will also be working on opening up our parks middle to end of next week and getting some water turned on. The weather looks like it's going to start turning around. So we're going to be working on that next week, as well as maybe a first round of brush cleanup.
Okay, anything else?
Unless you have questions for me.
Well, I was going to bring up something that a news report I saw with not only the Chippewa being high, but the Mississippi is quite high and so on. And I don't know if it was down in Cochran or Fountain City, and about them down there doing some sandbagging. And it was interesting when they were telling the story is what we've always talked about. It's not just the water, because they're trying to put these up plus pump water, but it's the water that comes up from the ground and through the system, because they were showing a sidewalk down there where water was basically coming up to the thing. So when you have a flood like this, it's not just that, it's not like a lake where you put something up and it stays back. With a river, that water's moving and it comes and it will come up from underneath the street.
Correct. So like, for example, when the water was into our shop doors down here, it wasn't quite into our salt shed. When we were doing some work in our salt shed, you dug down with a shovel about a foot in solid water, because that was the level of the groundwater that was out by our shop. So it is definitely not just sand, but a lot of people ask me, why don't you just run a row of sandbags up that sidewalk and keep that river out? Not that simple. You have how many storm outlets where that water's coming back up from behind it. You have groundwater where it's going to be seeping up through the cracks in the roads and the sidewalks. So there's really nothing that we're going to install that's going to keep that water at bay.
Sure. And as I said, yeah, floods are a little more complicated, just saying water comes up and you push it back. So, but it was interesting because they were actually showing that, and I thought that was a good story about how that's also something communities deal with. Okay, any questions for utilities, public works? Okay, move on, discussion, possible action regarding the ash tree program. And as we discussed at the last meeting about bringing this back for consideration, The major reason why, I know that we have some citizens who object to the way that it was presented, but the major reason why I thought it was important to get this back on the agenda was because of the fact that the grant is actually administered a little different than what we approved.
Right.
So I thought it was important to bring it back for another decision concerning on how we're going to move forward. Now, we've heard their objections from certain members of the public and why they believe that that's going to be the case. The first thing I'd like to do is if you could explain, and again, how the grant was being administered the way that the DNR, we believe it was presented to us, and then actually that it's a little bit different because of the fact that we were asking people, we were having the property owners pay for that. If you could please explain that.
All right. So I explained a little bit of that rather briefly in my memo there, but again, to outline a little bit. When we first looked at this program, we were looking at it as basically getting 50% of the cost from the homeowners. Again, knowing that the ordinance says that they are 100% responsible for the cost. So again, we were looking to help the homeowners here when we applied for this grant. And so that basically we would have, the city would make the full payment to the contractor to the tune of just over $10,000 with the 19 trees we were looking at right now.
Correct.
The homeowners would basically pay half of that, and then the grant would pay the other half. And basically, through some of the complaining that got through to the DNR, she came back to us and said, maybe I wasn't understanding what you guys were planning there, but, so are you getting money from the outside from somebody, that's what the homeowners are paying? And again, I know we told her that in the first meeting, but it got misrelayed poorly, I guess. Because, well, technically, that counts as other revenue. And again, we explained to her that this is a voluntary program. Now, I want to point out very quickly, this is not an assessment. This is not a special assessment. That's as you guys well know, that's a whole other process, legal process that we have to go through. This is a voluntary program. But again, talking to Ms. Kraus with the DNR, she's saying, well, technically then that's other revenue. So at the end of the day, what would really come out of this would be the homeowner would essentially pay 50%. The grant would cover about 25%, and the city would have to cover about 25% of the cost. Again, we thought our cost was going to be essentially zero, but if we want to run the program the way we presented it, that's what it would come out to be. So at this point, again, going through the process, and we've got 5 basically people that have returned, 5 of the 9 that we sent it to. I want to make that very clear too. 5 have already signed up for the program, and we've got calls from at least 5 other people that want to participate. So the fact that we've got essentially 1 resident that doesn't like it, there's a lot of others that do. So again, kind of pointing that out as well. But so back to the point here of potentiality, we can continue with the program, but in order to qualify for the entire grant, we probably have to cut some trees down in our parks, which Matt does have some money budgeted for. So again, our point is try not to let the grant go to waste, but we didn't think as much of it, or frankly, not as much of it is going to be applied to the Boulevard Tree Program as we initially thought. So that's where we stand. Again, this is still dollars to help the homeowners.
So the question would be this, so if we're still figuring spending about $10,000 total on the number of trees we're talking about removing. So if we went forward with the program just to say that the homeowners would be responsible for the half, we would only actually be, and again, this is without doing anything different, to say if we just went with that program, is that of the grant money, we're going to get about $2,500.
Correct.
And then the other $2,500 is going to have to be covered by the city. I understand we got about $3,000 in that budget for trees and stuff, correct?
Well, again, to be clear, those were intended for park trees.
Those are intended
Yes.
for park trees.
Yeah.
So we'd have to use that money to cover this grant.
To cover our share, what the city share of the grant would be because of the way that we're paying for it.
At this point, we just accepted the folks that were in the program right now. That comes up to about, we get about $1,000 back from the grant. We'd have to spend $1,000, and then potentially we could spend what Matt has budgeted in parks to get almost the remaining rest of the grant. If we did $6,000, $7,000 worth of tree cuttings in the parks, then we could get another $3,000+ back in the grant.
Because you're saying that.
Because that still remains eligible.
At this point here, the people have returned is about $2,000 worth of work?
Correct. Well, almost $4,000 in total work, of which they'd be paying about 2,000, so we'd be eligible for almost 1,000 back in the grant. Again, kind of at that 50%, 25%, 25%.
With the remaining amount of the grant money we're trying to get, whatever we would use up, what we had available in the budget, and then cut city trees in parks or wherever we have to cut.
And that reimbursement would be the full 50%, because again, we're spending our own money. And we verified with Ms. Kraus that that's purely acceptable. Again, even though we said this was for a boulevard program, they're not that limited, not that strict, so.
Assume we keep this the way it was. Do we have to re-let the people, because maybe we're changing something, do we have to, people that didn't send the letter
Yeah.
back?
What we're not changing is the cost of the people. That is, that
Or do we need
stays
to
the
have
same.
those people get a chance to send that back, or are they just, oh, because they didn't?
Well, frankly, I mean, as you heard at the last meeting, there were some people that didn't like, the deadlines that I set, and it was almost a 2-month process. So, and some of these people we tried to contact like via phone as well. A couple of them were just, no, I'm not interested. Okay.
I'm only asking because, like, for, use Mr. Leffing, for example, if we move forward with this, and he was waiting for our decision, do we give him another crack? I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm sorry, if you're asking for my recommendation, Nick, if he wants in, we let him in. And
Before we move on to the
Right.
other people that contacted you, I guess.
Well, again, at this point, I guess the other piece of that one would be, do we contact those people, or do we go ahead with our park trees to use up the rest of the grant?
Use the rest.
And then kind of reassess
So
in
how
the
many
future.
people sent in?
That's it.
So there's five families, essentially, 5 residents. I'm sorry, 9 total we sent them to, 5 returned.
5 returned.
Obviously, the Lifferings are one of them outstanding yet. We heard just one other person, I think, that I've heard from that said, nope, I'm not interested in this. And again, just, don't want to pay, can't afford it. The other ones, we just have heard nothing from.
So can you explain to me again what happens to those that we assessed are the top 19 and they do nothing? What is our plan of action?
Well, again, hopefully we get grants in the future and put aside some future dollars to take care of these items. Or, again, as the ordinance currently reads, they're responsible for them, especially if they become a further hazard.
The way what would happen to them, the way the ordinance currently reads, unless you changed it, the way the ordinance currently reads, they'd have to pay they would have to bear the full burden of cutting that tree down. So they would have to pay a tree service, come and cut that tree down 100%. And if they chose not to, then we would send them a letter saying this tree is completely dead, it's a public nuisance, it needs to be cut down. They would again have the opportunity to get it cut down by a certain date. If they didn't, we would hire a tree service to come in, cut the tree down, and then we would bill them. And if they didn't pay it, it would essentially go on their taxes.
So let me ask it a different way. How far are those trees from that happening?
Some of them a long ways, some of them a couple of years.
I don't know if you got, when you did the assessment with the DNR rep.
We didn't get
Didn't quite
in,
that
you know,
deep, yeah.
it's, when I went around and did an assessment with him, it's like we can't tell exactly how diseased the tree is and tell you the tree's got 1 year left, or 2 years left, or 6 months left, right? You can tell by the amount of bark that starts falling off that it's dead and it's just gonna be a matter of time. But basically, what he stated was, you triage it, and you go after the ones that are probably gonna, potentially take down power lines, potentially fall on roads, potentially fall on homes. You just go around and you look at them and you triage the ones that look bad, that they're gonna look like they potentially could fall down in a couple of years, i.e. all the spalding on the side of it, and take those down. So that's kind of what we did to get these 19 trees. There's a couple of these ash trees that are in this program that are actually very healthy, but we're gonna take them down because we're already there. We're not gonna go to John Doe's yard. If John Doe, like Mr. Lifting said, he has 4, we're not gonna go to his yard, cut one down, and then go somewhere else in town and cut one down. We're gonna take care of the 4 while we're there, because that's gonna get us the best price to cut those 4 down. The more times the the more times the contractor has to move, the higher the cost is. So some of these trees we're cutting down because we're already in that yard cutting these trees down. Does that make sense?
It does, and the reason I was asking is for the people that said they don't have the money. Point being, well, at some point, it could get forced on them to do it regardless.
It could, and I, be clear that Matt and I are on the same page of this. We're not looking to make this onerous on people. And at this point, the other thing I would bring up is, fair to say, Pepin County's also a little late to the game in the, the Emerald Ash Borer has hit us a little more recently than a lot of other places. So, I mean, even Nick, I'm sure you saw this at the golf course. For the most of those trees, they just looked really bad. Were they in danger of falling down? I mean, how long does it really take for a tree to really get into that shape? I mean, again, we all know dead trees around in the woods and things like that. It takes a long time. So I don't know that there's a lot of immediate danger. So again, we're gonna keep trying to find ways to get around this, or at least work with some grants and again, help the homeowners to some degree. But again, we're trying to help them. This is something that, again, we have the ability to 100%.
So the wording on the grant says the homeowner has to pay 50%.
Well, what we proposed was that the homeowner pay 50% to help mitigate our costs. And again, we thought at the beginning, the city would have absolutely no cost. The way that we presented and what we heard back on the grant, what Ms. Kraus is now telling us, that when you go that route, essentially the city does have to come up with some money.
Okay.
The grant will only be 50% of whatever
of the
dollar
net,
amount
so
the
to
city
speak.
puts in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're charging the homeowners, they're not looking, that's not eligible. They'll only cover they'll only match 50% up to 5,000 of what the city puts into the project. So if we put $0 into the project, they give us $0.
So the idea was sitting there saying, if we already have the 3,000 in a tree budget, and if we at least did that, we'd at least get 3,000 back in grants.
Correct.
I want to be very clear too, that Ms. Kraus is being very helpful with us. You know, one of the things that even she brought up, that when talking to their grant people, and technically, if we waited and didn't bill these people until next year, that would be outside the grant cycle, and then we'd be eligible for the full 50% again. Now, I applaud her willingness to think outside the box, but frankly, then we really couldn't apply for a grant next year. We'd almost have to skip a year and then go a year and skip a year. So while it is an option, it just delays what we're trying to do here, so. But that would be another way of doing it.
I just want to clarify, some people that got the letter told me after they received the letter, if they didn't apply for it, they were obligated to cut that tree down. I told them it's not.
Travis, like,
it's
Jared
not
Letter,
what's
it did
stated.
not say that in there.
I
But
just
that's the
want
impression
that.
somebody, yeah.
Right, and I'm like, that's not, you can leave it up as long as until it falls down or it becomes a nuisance.
Yeah.
Basically is the way the ordinance
Yeah,
states.
So that's kind of why I was
We were-
one of the two asking if
Yeah.
you were just gonna
Oh,
do it
yeah,
and bill
no,
it. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, that letter, it didn't say anything about having, that tree has to be cut down now. You know,
Yeah, and again, the wording was, we strongly encourage you to participate, only because these grants aren't guaranteed. That's as strong a wording as was in that letter.
And when, this goes back, it has to be 8, 9 years ago, when we used to have joint cities meetings, and we went to that one over in Augusta. And we had some people come in and sit there saying, and of course, at that time, Emerald Ash Borer wasn't as bad in this area, we're south of here, and then it was working its way, and so on and so forth. And that's why we've done a number of background things, including counting the number of trees that we could, make an inventory of our trees, and so on. And then as they were sitting there saying, this is one of those problems that most communities, because you don't have the money to do it all overnight,
Right.
you gradually take care of this over time to take out the ash trees so that over a period of time, and then finally they're just all gone, because they're all gonna die at some point. Anyway, you can treat them, but the cost of treating them is quite astronomical, as to my understanding, compared to what it costs to get rid of them.
What's the average age of those trees?
Most of them were probably put in in the 70s, 80s.
When the elm trees.
When
died,
all the elm trees died. Now, the other thing that a lot of people, of course, foresters are sitting there saying about communities, if you do replace trees, and again, the whole decision about putting them in people's boulevards, that's one issue, but generally, even in our parks, they're trying to have a mix of trees.
Yeah.
See, because again, we all had elms, they all died. And then ash was the one, everybody went ash, and then now all of a sudden, we've got a disease that's taking those out. I mean, there's some communities out east that
There's
are,
oak wilt, there's just
Oh.
about every brand of.
but at least if you mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's some communities out east that have spent millions and millions of dollars to get rid of trees, ash trees, over the last couple decades.
And they planted the ash trees because they grew fast and
Yeah.
And they're
they
beautiful
were nice
trees.
shade
Yeah.
trees, yes.
And the homeowner did not have a say in whether it went in the boulevard at the time, the city just put them in because it was a grant, or?
No, it was
Can't-
probably,
We
Yeah,
have found no
can't
evidence
answer, we found nothing.
Because I find it hard to believe that they want, whatever council, what year is this, that the ash trees,
of
90s?
70s, 80s.
Oh,
Yeah,
is that?
when they started.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
I find it hard to believe that they would force they won't even give them the option, hey, you don't want them there? All right, that's cheaper for us.
because the one thing we do today is every time we do a street project and we have to take trees out because of it, as far as replacing any trees, we talk with every property owner, correct?
So we put trees in our budget, and then when the project's done, we look and see if there's a place that we can reasonably plant a tree that is not under a power line, on top of a water line, on top of a sewer line, on top of a storm line. So we try to reasonably see if there's places we can plant trees. We actually have not planted a tree on a boulevard since we did Madison Street in 2012. So we haven't planted, the city, have not, actually, they didn't plant one on that project either. So we have not planted a boulevard tree on the city's dime in, well, at least 15 years.
Do we have any idea when the ordinance was wrote or passed that the citizens are to maintain a tree?
Long time ago. I mean, probably 50 plus years. We can't find an instance of where it isn't in.
Yeah. I know in the minutes of 1988, it was stated right in the minutes that the ordinance said it's the property owner's responsibility to pay for the trees. So this ordinance goes back long
And
time.
the council turned down that request.
That's
I
correct.
won't name who the council members were at that time.
I know. The only other thing about this is to try to figure out, to maximize the grant. That's the other
Yeah,
thing.
right.
About, taking, if we have X amount of money in the budget or whatever, obviously, if we're going to use part of the grant money, let's maximize as much as we can get. That's the only thing that I think is an important factor.
Yeah, and just one other clarification piece. I mean, we've heard a lot about other communities that do this. Okay, I can speak for Eau Claire's. So on my tax bill, I'm paying $50+ a year for forestry services. I don't have any boulevard trees. I don't have any, none of my neighbors do. So again, you're paying for it one way or the other. Now, clearly in Durand's case, ultimately, it was decided that this is the way they were gonna go. And a number of other communities. Ms. Kraus at the DNR was very clear that the vast majority of small communities have the same ordinance. So we're not unique, we're not
And they do it,
mistreating our taxpayers.
So when you
They
say
do
you're
it to
paying
keep cost- they do it to
$50,
keep
is
costs
that part of the
down.
taxes or is that?
Exactly, it's on the taxes, because the city of Eau Claire and the Menominee have forestry divisions. They have staff that do it, and so that's.
So it's a line item on your?
It's, you have to extrapolate it.
But it's
Yeah,
still-
so again, I have the skills to do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It comes out to.
Well, we hope
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, exactly. So from that, again, so you're paying for it one way or the other as a town. And again, in my case, I've been paying $50 a year for 30 years, and I'll never see a benefit. Is that fair? Again, to each his own. But
So how much would the city have to spend to maximize the grant?
on the Boulevard Tree Program?
Yes.
$5,000,
$5,000.
which we do not have budget.
So essentially 3 is the most for this year then.
Well, I mean.
If
three
we stay
have-
within the budget, or if we
yeah,
go find somebody, you can find someplace else if you really want to try to use some of it.
and
Got
we
some
go-
flying insect money I can
Yeah,
tap
yeah,
into.
yeah. It's,
See,
yeah.
Oh, you don't wanna touch that one?
Not a good year for that one.
Because we already agree with, because we already have a service that we've hired and we got the best bid on, right? So we have a company, right, that we're hiring?
Yes, he's, whether he cuts down 19 trees or 15 trees, it's the same price. Let me retract that. And these boulevard trees are roughly all the same size, right? So if we stick it to the boulevard, it's gonna be that 550. I have ash trees in Tarrant Park that are 2 times bigger than these. Those trees might be a little bit more expensive to cut down in the fact than these boulevard trees. So, if we do go to the park, it might not necessarily be, we'll still only spend $10,000, we just might not get 19 trees cut down, we might only get 15 total trees cut down. That, to kind of clarify that a little bit.
And what was the number between trees we have in our parks or other public property and boulevard trees? What's the total?
So we have roughly 75 total ash trees when we went around and did our count. When we did that count, that we did road facing. So we drove down the road, between the road and the house, we just counted it. Some of those, without actually going out and surveying where the road right of way is, sometimes it's difficult for us to determine, geez, that tree's 20 feet off the curb line. Is that the road right of way or isn't that the road right of way? So we just counted it just to get a number. So of that 75, we probably have roughly 12 to 15 of them that are in our parks or on our property that need to be cut down.
Okay.
So to clarify the price per tree, if you do this and he only comes to cut 5 of them down instead of 19, that price is still the same for those 5 trees for those homeowners.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions about the program? Any about the way that this grant is executed, just so everybody understands that? Obviously, talk about the history of the situation, so I think we covered a lot of that ground. So the question is, as far as making a change, that's what we would have to do. I mean, the council already voted to put the program in place. The one thing about it is that we really don't need to go in, because we already got some money budgeted. As long as you live within the budgeted money we have, we don't need to go find, only if we wanted to change it to say, to add another 2,000 to that, to try to take some more of our trees out and maximize the grant. But that's a whole different thing. That would be looking for that, and whether we were able to take money from a different part of the budget to be able to do something like that. But again, at the end of the day, as far as to still to go along with the property owners paying for the 50%, the city paying for 25, and the grant paying for 25. That's if we don't make any changes. Because again, we have to enact the grant the way it's presented to us. And we're saying if we do that right now, we have with the trees that we have, that people have already spoke up. So but then there's 2 things. Do we just go with the people who've already spoke up and then try to spend the rest on city trees? Or do we go find some other private individuals that would like to take advantage of the program?
And I think to answer that, Mayor, maybe, like Matt just said, we talk about, he'd probably reassess what park trees we have, their size, talk to the tree service and see what kind of money we're talking about, if there's.
But that would probably be the route to go.
Yeah. And then
To try to maximize more of that grant.
before we went out and.
Before we
found some more
solicited,
people, yeah.
before we solicited any more.
Unless you want to give these other 4, we want to give these 4 people, Mr. Liffering, who's been here, another chance to jump on board. Are we doing that or not?
Well, that's, yeah.
Or are we just
I-
jumping?
I think, again, there's one that's already said no way.
Yeah.
So,
I think we should give anybody that already sent it in,
they're
Yep.
committed to the thing first,
you
yeah.
know, the other 4 you said didn't return anything?
Correct.
They want nothing to do with it.
Well, there's one that flat out said, I want nothing to do with it. 2 we haven't heard from. The 4th is deliverance.
Yeah, I would definitely give him the option to take it if he wants it.
But the other direction would be that as far as not expanding it at a point this year, but any other dollars that we would have available, we would try to look at doing city trees. Because we're gonna spend city money, we might as well try to get those cleared out. Because again, they're gonna have to go sooner or later, right? So,
Obviously, it'd be nice to get as many property owners as possible on board, but if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. That's-
Well, and again, that would be our plan for continuing in future years as well. We didn't look at this as being just a 1-year program.
Anyways,
Are you gonna give those property owners that don't accept it this year an option, another option in another year?
It's a good question, Don. I don't know if we go to them first. I think we probably, every year, I guess, maybe we reassess our
Well,
fee situation.
like you said, it may be an issue of whether they can afford it or not this year,
Yeah.
so.
Generally, it's gonna be the worst ones every year. You say out of
If they're on the
75
list this
trees.
year, their trees aren't getting any better next year, the year
Right.
after, the year after.
yeah, they're not gonna miraculously.
I mean, again, a couple of these that probably pretty good, they're getting cut down because we're on their property. That might last a little longer, but if they're on this list, it's not because their trees are in good condition.
Here, you thought he'd come back and use it.
We waited for it.
We all have this.
Should've waited till I got up and walked out the door, then you know.
I don't know if this changes anything, but I'm gonna ask it just because the price per tree in the boulevard doesn't change if he cuts 5 or 19. I get your point if there's 4 close together, but if it would soften the blow for them and gain 2 other trees in the town out of someone else's boulevard, would that be an option? So they wouldn't have 4 this year, they'd have 2 this year, and 2 of more worse trees if would be taken down.
Of the ones that we have, that we put the letter up to, was 4 the max?
One had 5.
Wow, Mr. Liffering had 4 and one other property owner had 5, and that's one we have heard nothing from.
Okay.
So of 19, the 19 trees we had scheduled to come down, 2 of the property owners had 9 combined.
9 of the,
Everybody else on the list just had 1 or 2.
1 or 2.
How much does it actually go down to per tree for the homeowner?
$290, maximum of $290, we said.
Per
It
tree.
could be a little bit less if it's per tree. Yeah. And again,
So Mr. Liffering has.
1,000.
Well,
$1,160.
and again, crystal clear, this is cutting the tree down, taking everything away, grinding the stump, and restoring the boulevard. That's everything. I'm sorry, Nick, back to your question. Frank, I don't know that we care. If the Lifferings only wanted 2 cut, is that a big deal, Matt? I don't see it as.
No, I can go find 2 other trees cut
Yeah,
down.
right,
But that's what I mean.
yeah.
If the cost is an issue, and he wanted to do 2 of them, the 2 worst of the 4, and if I'm understanding you correctly, there's worse trees in the town, we're only doing those, all 4 of those because they're by each other.
Correct. Well,
Well,
all
They
4,
are
all for it.
all 4 of his are pretty bad.
Okay,
The person on here with 5 trees, that person has the ones there, 2 of them are, you wouldn't even hardly know they're diseased, and 3 of them are Spalding.
and I wasn't using Mr. Leffering as an example, like, if that person that has 5, you know, would that be an option? We haven't heard anything from
We
him.
We haven't heard anything.
And we think part of that reason is because the trees don't look that bad.
Sure.
But
Well, yeah, I mean, we can, like I said, we've had people calling us, asking us to participate, that some of them have trees that look relatively close to these ones that are on here, just they're completely other end of town, so we concentrated this grant cycle in this area, because this area had the majority of the worst trees without mobilizing.
Do we have to have a professional tree service take all of these down?
Yes, we cannot cut trees down.
Okay.
We do not have the proper equipment and safety to cut trees down.
But the property owner can take them down
The
themselves.
property owner themselves can cut them down, yes.
Could we, just spewing at the mouth, could we work out something with the county? I mean, obviously, they cut trees down a lot. Would they be able to?
So these can't be, you know, like out in the county, they're not limbing them
Yeah, they're
with
just
bucket
tipping the whole
trucks.
thing.
These trees have to be limbed from top, limb by
Okay.
limb by limb by limb. They can't just be flopped out and then chopped up.
Okay.
And then a lot of these are entangled in power lines,
Yeah, I
entangled
knew
in,
that.
entangled in cable lines, so it's kind of a specialty issue.
Being a grant, I would normally want that have to be a commercial
Yes.
If we're using
Well, we,
any grant,
as long as
no,
we're
not,
paying,
no,
yeah, yeah.
part of the grant money can be, like, if we end up having a lot of labor, we can actually keep track of our labor and assess that towards the grant as well. But the problem is, we don't have bucket trucks and we don't have all the safety equipment to properly cut these trees down. We don't have chippers, you know, this is all getting chipped, other than the logs that are gonna get hauled away to get burnt. It's a lot easier to get rid of chipped wood than it is to stockpile them, and we can't burn in the city. The county is actually now charging for brush, so we can't just haul it over to the dump for free anymore. So, we're limited on what we can do. This way, the contractor's actually getting rid of everything.
I know there's a lot of discussion on the cost, especially for folks that have 4+ trees, but for those of you that have had trees cut down, $550 a tree that we're being charged for the removal, the stump grinding, and the restoration is still a pretty good deal.
yeah, very good deal, and half that is considered for veterans.
Are we forcing people to cut their trees down?
No,
No.
yeah, the question
This
came
is-
up really, we
yeah.
are not, no, again.
Strictly a
it's- yeah,
voluntary program right now.
Yeah.
So Mr. Leffert can leave his trees
He can.
if he chooses not to participate.
Now, if it falls over in a storm,
Well,
He's
yeah,
gonna be cleaning
I
it up then.
Right, yeah.
I get that part of it, but I'm just saying, he doesn't have to have it out.
correct. Right now, I don't.
How are, just because he's been here, how are his trees?
Pretty bad,
Pretty bad?
yeah.
They
As
got
in like dead limbs and that type of thing?
Yeah, spalding, some of the limbs are starting to die. I
a
mean,
lot of barks gone.
yeah, a lot of bark falling
I
off.
haven't been.
I mean, they're still budding out and leafing out, you know, but they're really starting to die.
Okay. Any other questions? So the question goes back to about, I mean, are we keeping the program as is? And are we gonna give somebody a shot to get in or out with these changes? At this point here, if we got people who wanna participate, if somebody doesn't, then we take the other dollars available, the city dollars available we have to try to maximize on city property to get rid of some city trees. I mean, that's basically what we need to do here. And again, 3,000 in the budget is what we have for trees, right? That's the whole tree budget.
It's a whole park tree budget.
Park
yes.
tree budget, but obviously this is a project that but we're saying that we would obviously try to maximize as many of those dollars as possible. Because we take the people who signed up right now, it's $1,000 their cost, $1,000 our cost as far as the grant's concerned. So the other $2,000 could be used for city trees, correct? And we should be able to get 2,000 matching for those. For that 2,000.
Just to clarify, Mayor. So for the people that have signed up, it's about $2,000. We have to kick in 1,000, the grant would kick in 1,000 as well. Because again, it's 50% at this point, as the program is.
Oh, hold a second here. You said that the what people that we have signed up for it, how many total trees?
6, Matt, does that sound right?
Give me a second here.
Six
Yeah.
trees at.
6 trees are gonna cost us just about $4,000. The citizens would kick in about 2,000. We'd have 2,000 left, which would be a quarter for the city, or split that. 1,000 for the city, 1,000 for the grant.
And we would take the rest of the other grant money, or
And apply it to the park.
rest of the other tree money,
Money.
and match it up directly with the grant to take out city trees.
Correct. And again, and it sounds like, but still would give the folks that have not signed up yet one last opportunity. Yep. And again, frankly, we think the Lifferings would be the only people that would consider that.
Okay. For the options in front of us, somebody's got an idea how we want to move forward. Obviously, if we're changing anything, we would have to have a motion to do so. Because if we don't have a motion, it remains in place the way we were doing it. It's just that the city's going to pay a little bit more money to help cover that part of it. And then what I'm saying is, we got other tree money, let's use it as much as we can and maximize. That's what I'm saying.
And if you want to go that route, Mayor, I'd still prefer a motion, only because then we have something to tell these folks that have contacted us that want to be in the program that, sorry, we're going to go a little different route for the rest of this year, but we'll consider you for future years' programs. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying.
All right.
So you'd be making the motion for the 25, 25, 50, up to utilizing the 3,000 from the parks for tree cutting,
Our tree budget, yeah.
from the tree budget.
So again, you pretty much leave the program in place, especially as we're talking to the homeowners. Their cost is not changing at all.
Right.
Obviously, we have to kick in a little bit more, but then it's a matter of whether or not you want the lift rings back in.
So
If you want a last
if
chance.
we let them the last chance and they apply, we cut down less of our trees.
I think it's a fair
Correct.
statement. Yeah.
I guess my 2 cents,
Yeah.
if there's a way to find an extra 2,000 in the budget to take advantage of the full grant, that's where I would go.
Yeah, we're gonna do our best there, yeah, yeah.
So just, I'll make the motion, we go ahead with the revised urban forestry grant at 25 grand, 25 city, 50% landowner, utilizing the 3,000 in the tree budget. Potentially up to the 5,000 if we can.
But it has to be budgeted.
Yeah.
In city parks, on city property, not letting outsiders into the grant?
Well, I guess that's the question.
Yeah.
So obviously, we honor the commitments for the people we received.
Honoring the commitments, and then allow them, the ones that you had already asked, to take advantage if
One
they,
last chance.
if they deem necessary, one last chance.
Somebody want a second?
Second.
Okay, we got it on the floor. Okay. Any more questions about that? I know this is, there's got a lot of information here again, the way we had it set up, and then obviously, there's a number of the moving parts that have been added to this because of the way that the grant is executed.
So I'll ask one more.
Absolutely.
If we find an extra 2,000 to maximize the grant, just to be clear, are we cutting more city parks down, or are we going out to people that have contacted us? Does that need to be said?
It's a good question. I mean, what's the feeling of the group to say, I'm saying at this point, we try to get rid of some of our city trees. That's what I'm saying. I think we should.
How many are in the park?
About a dozen.
Does-
So even just-
Especially, and by the way, if you had to say, turn around and, based on that, if we are looking at, of those dozen trees, are there half of them that really should go right now?
Our park trees are actually not in that bad a condition.
Oh, okay. That wasn't the answer. You were saying, yeah, you were saying 6 are bad, we better do it now. That's what I was hoping for, but obviously I didn't get that
Not
answer.
gonna lie to you.
Okay, no, I said that's okay.
Frankly, if those trees were, being that it's a public park and our insurance, we would have picked those trees first.
Yeah, if something would happen to them, and that's, you know,
Our liability.
our liability and everything if something would happen.
I have oak trees that are in worse condition that I need to cut down, but this doesn't qualify.
Well, I guess I'd rather see some of the residential trees taken down before the park trees, if the park trees are in fairly good shape.
Yeah, I
agree.
Yeah.
So we have a list of people who contacted us?
We do, yeah, we kept that information. Now, yeah.
How do we prioritize it?
But then we're
Yeah,
also
we
gonna
will.
have to take some out of the park, being the park budget involved, or are we just basically reallocating that budget?
Well, that's, I guess we'll have to talk about that, but I think it's.
So if you wanna offer this to Boulevard people, we can basically say, I'm gonna go find 19 trees in city boulevards with participants that are willing to pay the $290 a tree. Okay, and then it'll be the same formula. We'll be collecting $5,000, and then we'll be paying 25, and the grant will be paying 25. You will not be able to maximize the grant to $5,000.
But we would get rid of that many more
But you'll
boulevard
get rid of
trees,
more
yeah.
boulevard trees. So essentially what you can say is you want the property owners to pay $290 per tree, authorize me to go out and find the 19 trees regardless of where they are in the city, as long as they're on road right away, and the property owner is willing to pay the $290. We collect their money, And then the 50/50 is what's left, which would be approximately 2,500 state, 2,500 city. We're within our $3,000 budget. That's probably gonna be the easiest way to do it without getting too much more convoluted.
And not that you have to have this exact number, is the people who contacted us concerning that they want to participate in the program, do you know how many trees that is?
I have not went out and counted them because I wasn't really gonna waste a lot of time doing a
Until we
lot of
had
that work
information.
until I had direction. So I have not went out and counted them, no.
The other part of that is, time is becoming of the essence now again for our contractor. So if people get mad at the letters that you've got a couple weeks to say yay or nay, again, just know that that might come back to you, because we have to find out really soon.
Well, and also, if the ones in the boulevard are in better condition than the ones in the park, would you go to the park ones?
We always have that option.
Yeah, we always have we can cut down whatever ash tree in the city of Durand we choose.
I know when we first started talking about this, a year ago, it was worst trees first, that was, and boulevard, obviously, residential, but worst trees from worst to best, basically.
And maybe to clarify this a bit, it's really more hazardous.
Hazardous.
Yeah, hazardous. If
I
somebody
mean,
comes
they're all in about the same, except, I see Matt's, some of the park trees and the boulevard trees we mentioned with a person that has 5. But for the most part, they all look about the same. They've all recently dead or dying, so again, we're trying to get them out of the wires, potentially out of, if you know they're gonna potentially fall in the street, we're looking at those, or on property, those type of things. So that's just a quick clarification there, Travis.
Okay. So are we clarifying that we go after boulevard trees first or park trees? Nick, you were saying, I mean, you're feeling like we should go after boulevard as many as possible.
Yeah,
Everybody else feeling go after boulevard?
Boulevard trees.
Okay, find people who want to participate, try to spend it that way.
And they're paying the $290.
Yep. Especially if anybody's come to us and said, I want to participate.
Give all those a chance and then go from there.
And is that, pay that in 1 year?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, as I think we might have talked a little bit, maybe, I don't think you were here, Matt. You know, there's some potential that we get around some of these grant provisions if we don't charge till next year. Abby's still looking at that for us, but from the standpoint that we consider that we probably want to apply every year, it really doesn't help us long term.
No, I'm meaning
But-
like as far as like the
Yeah,
people
this is-
that,
yeah,
the
because
people
this
that
is-
are owing
yeah.
$1,100, are they owing that to us on this year's taxes?
Well, again, it's, so, we put that out there that we wanted to get paid this year. And if it wouldn't, it would go on your taxes, and then you'd have basically another year to pay. So that would be
That's how
the
it's
way.
worded in the letter if they signed up for it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because technically, for a program like this, the homeowner has to give us permission. So it was right in the letter that, again, we would like the payment up front, but if you do not pay by the end of the year, it will go on the tax roll. And again, that probably sounds threatening to a degree, but they have to sign off on that. We aren't just allowed to do that for any type of, or any non-specific city type of purpose. Utilities, things like that, yep, we can put on the tax roll. Something like this, we have to be a little more careful.
No, I just clarifying that, that's what the letter said, because we're not forcing them to cut it down. So they
You're
can
right,
say
again,
no.
this is a voluntary program, so if you agree to these provisions, you sign, including that, yes, it would go on the
Yeah.
tax roll if you didn't pay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay? Any other questions? Again, we have a motion and second on the floor. Everybody clarified exactly how it's going to move forward? Okay, do I get a roll call this if we change the budget, or we got to change it or not?
I don't, at this point, we're not changing the budget, so
We're
I
not.
don't think you require
Okay.
a roll call.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion's agreed. Okay, next we'll move into closed session. The council will convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C and Wisconsin